To add a different meaning and value to our lives, perhaps we should seek the source of beauty not only in the appearance of our facial features, but in how we position ourselves in relation to our surroundings. You know very well that some women possess tremendous energy, particularly through their silence, their posture, and even the magnificent balance and aura within their very being. In fact, what defines them and clearly shows them is never about their makeup, their bodies, or what they wear. What makes them distinctly attractive and beautiful is actually how they protect their boundaries, how they manage their energy, how they convey it, and their determination and ability to stay away from anything that consumes their energy. Of course, these women are also living proof of a beauty that starts with their outward appearance and then delves very directly into their inner strength. And when we truly begin to comprehend their stories, we also see much more clearly the real capacity within ourselves that is secretly waiting to emerge. The real purpose of this video was to understand why behaviors that truly beautiful women never do or even consider doing are so transformative. So, before moving on to the first point, I'd like to ask you to do something very small but equally effective. Please write "True beauty begins within" in the comments. Because believe me, writing this sentence is not just an interaction, it is also the first step in claiming your own identity and your own value in a very loud voice, and you will inspire others who read it. 1. They don't perceive beauty only as outward appearance. They never neglect their character. When we analyze the behavior of beautiful women in general, we come to the following conclusion. In fact, the most obvious difference is not just their outward appearance. They have the ability to go far beyond that, because beautiful women are very aware of this. The real source of their radiance is not the aesthetic harmony of their faces. It stems from the impact they create in their relationships with the people around them. For this reason, when they see themselves in the mirror, they evaluate not their makeup or their hair, but especially how calm their spirit is, and even how compassionate and serene their hearts are. And they know very well that beauty is not just an external appearance, a facial expression. It is also a clear character, a clear mind, and energy that is fully internalized. When they realize this, their external appearance also begins to shine aesthetically. Because I can comfortably say that an external appearance that is not supported by character is like a thin cloud of smoke blown by the wind. It may look beautiful at first, but it definitely lacks depth with its superficial effect. In addition, they absolutely do not surrender to other people's ideas about beauty. You know, in the modern world, perceptions of beauty and trends around us are constantly changing. They change from time to time, from place to place. However, because beautiful women focus on finding what suits them best, they do not allow this change to enslave them in some ways. In this way, they determine what their inner values accept and how they want to see themselves, rather than what fashion forces them to do. Even though the people around them say that their appearance has changed quite positively, they actually feel that their character has matured more. Of course, this maturity becomes very clear and understandable through their reactions to critical situations they encounter in life. The politeness and harsh reality they try to maintain during emotional storms, and the perfect determination they show when forming bonds. For this reason, their beauty actually grows not with the passing of years, but especially as their character develops. Beautiful women are aware that no matter how beautiful their faces are, the softness of their voices, the depth that comes from their hearts, and even their gestures and behavior are much more important and impressive. For this reason, they first regulate their energy in every environment they enter. And when they get angry in a negative situation, they never act with rage, or when they are hurt, they do not sulk and shut themselves off. This charm mechanism they display is a clear demonstration of the harmony between emotional control and perfect aesthetics. Of course, you will appreciate that projecting a sense of confidence that goes beyond beauty is actually the most important formula for feeling good about yourself when you are starting afresh. For this reason, when beautiful women speak, people are drawn not only to what they say, but more to how they make them feel. And ultimately, they have realized that true beauty is actually the only and most important thing that can withstand time. Because you know very well that faces can change, our hair can change, our body image can change. But as a woman's character continues to grow stronger throughout this process, her attractiveness draws people to her like a magnet. By the way, I know this is at least the second or maybe third video you've watched on my channel, and it really saddens me that you're still not subscribed, because seeing you here, moving forward together on this journey, is very valuable to me. If you subscribe, you'll be supporting me in the strongest way possible, and we won't lose each other. 2. They never beg others for compliments about their beauty. Rest assured that truly beautiful women have this characteristic. They absolutely do not need approval from those around them, because they are well aware that becoming dependent on compliments actually turns into an invisible chain. So I can comfortably say that this creates a very dangerous situation that limits our self-confidence and makes us surrender to the opinions of those around us. Of course, these women stand up to life not by waiting for the approval of others, but rather by knowing and remembering the power of their own selves. Therefore, because they position themselves at the center of their own selves rather than in the gaze of others, their attractiveness becomes much clearer, because, as you will appreciate, when a person quietly and clearly accepts their own beauty, they realize something much more valuable than even the most personal compliments from those around them. Of course, looking at it from another angle, such women are much more beautiful and attractive, not because they don't expect praise from their surroundings, but because they absolutely don't need any compliments. This lack of need creates a natural self-confidence in them, and of course, this self-confidence leaves a much more impressive mark than any makeup or outfit we might wear. A woman who is not dependent on verbal compliments actually has a very different energy, because thanks to the confidence we can't quite explain, even when you look at their posture, they exude a loving solidity, and they send a very clear message to the outside world. I already see myself. Rest assured that what makes these women beautiful is definitely that they find themselves sufficient. For these women, compliments are not a confirmation of their existing beauty, but rather a reflection of their character. You can think of it this way: a compliment is not just an expression of a physical observation, it is also a perception of the woman's character, intellectual intelligence, or very high aura. For this reason, they are never affected by superficial compliments and do not take them very seriously. In fact, they know very well that a much more valuable bond is formed when they realize that someone truly understands them in the right way. And this awareness actually makes it quite difficult to manipulate them, because some people who turn praising beauty into a tactic and a game ultimately lose out against the energy of a woman who never needs compliments. This energy, rest assured, creates an irresistible attraction. 3. They do not neglect their health, sleep, and especially their skin. Now, friends, what I want to say here is this: the most fundamental secret of truly beautiful women is that the care they show themselves has become an uninterrupted discipline. Because I want to state clearly that they know beauty is not just a visible surface. It is a holistic balance that grows with the body's rhythm of rest, the clarity of the mind, and the inner order of the soul. A life of constant mental turmoil late into the night, or a lifestyle that strains the body, eventually casts a shadow on their faces. Naturally, beautiful women therefore place sleep and rest at the center of their aesthetics, because sleep is not only the silent renewal of the body, but also of the soul. A sufficiently rested mind even carries the facial muscles differently, and this is immediately noticeable when viewed from the outside. I should also add that their neglect of their health stems from viewing their beauty not as a decoration, but as an investment. Such women do not unconsciously surrender to behaviors that consume them. They stop before their fatigue becomes chronic. They do not ignore the signals their bodies give them, and they notice every area where stress accumulates. Being healthy is not just a physical goal for them. It is a cornerstone that preserves their energy, patience, and attractiveness. Naturally, as they take care of their health, they feel stronger, and this strength becomes a quiet authority that reflects in their beauty. Because a woman who protects her health actually protects her respect for her own worth. As most of us would guess, they see skincare not as a necessity, but as a gentle ritual of self-love. For these women, the skin is not just a surface that shows aging. It is a canvas that bears all the signatures of their lifestyle. In fact, they take the time to preserve its moisture, radiance, and elasticity. They know that every time they touch their skin, they are also touching themselves. Because skincare is not just a cosmetic process, it is the longest and most patient "I am worth it" sentence a woman says to herself. The radiance that appears on their faces as they maintain a regular skincare routine is actually a reflection of how carefully they carry their inner world. 4. They never live dependent on the approval of others. I want to start with this fact. The most obvious strength of truly beautiful women is that they have an inner balance that prevents them from tying their self-worth to the ups and downs of the outside world. Because they know that shining with someone else's approval means falling into darkness when that approval is withdrawn. Naturally, they do not become dependent on the need to be liked, appreciated, or constantly praised. On the contrary, they see freedom from this need as a sign of maturity. Defining oneself by the opinions of others points to an inner lack of confidence. These women, however, generate their own light. They continue to shine even if no one turns on the light. Of course, there is also this. Staying away from seeking approval makes their personal decisions stronger and clearer. Compromising for the sake of being approved by people silently erodes a woman's character. Beautiful women are conscious enough to notice this erosion. They don't do something just because society likes it, nor do they leave a situation just to avoid being misunderstood. The mark this freedom leaves is very powerful. People describe their stance as charismatic, yet charisma is often just a reflection of this truth. I can approve of myself. Furthermore, looking at it from another angle, the peace that comes from not constantly monitoring what others think is reflected on their faces as a deep sense of comfort and control. The need for approval even changes a person's facial features. Their eyebrows are always alert, their gaze always waiting for evaluation. Beautiful women realize that this invisible pressure diminishes them and do not waste their mental energy constantly guessing or explaining themselves. This is why they make an impact even when they stand silently in a room. They have obtained permission to be there from themselves, not from others. Let us not forget that this is a very profound form of beauty, invisible but definitely felt. 5. They do not fall into the trap of comparing themselves to others. We have come to one of the most important and valuable points. One of the most critical areas where truly beautiful women make a difference is that they consciously avoid the habit of measuring themselves against others. Because they know that comparison is an invisible poison that silently erodes a person's inner energy. It is not apparent from the outside, but it weakens self-confidence, breaks motivation, and clouds the clarity of the mind. Of course, these women do not question their own values when looking at the lives of others. They have the ability to perceive every success, every beauty, every development they see not as a threat, but as a natural part of life's diversity. In this way, the direction of their own stories is determined not by the spotlight on others' stages, but by the depth of their own inner voices. I would also like to say that women who do not compare themselves generate energy rather than lose it, because comparison is a vortex that stops people and condemns them to the constant feeling of, "I should have been better." These women, however, manage not to forget their own uniqueness while seeing the strengths of others. Of course, I should also mention that a woman's beauty is not overshadowed by another's. On the contrary, every woman carries a wholeness within her own structure. Because they have internalized this truth, the underlying unease created by comparison cannot reach them. They look in the mirror every morning, remembering that they must compete with their best selves. Being just a little better than they were yesterday is more than enough for them. The most explosive aspect of this is that the stance of women who do not fall into the trap of comparison is quieter, but much more impressive. Because you cannot see any haste, inadequacy, or anxiety on the faces of these women. Because they do not limit themselves with the aesthetic molds of others, there is an elegance in every step they take that comes from comfort. Comparison constricts even the body. It slumps the shoulders, constricts the breath, and creates insecurity in the gaze. These women, however, walk to their own rhythm, so their body language is freer, their energy softer, and their appeal more genuine. People look at them and wonder, why are they so different? Without realizing that difference actually comes from freedom. Ultimately, where there is no comparison, true beauty blossoms just as easily. Women who do not compete with others have a light in their faces, a calmness in their voices, and confidence in their attitudes. Because this confidence is visible from the outside, people notice their beauty more. While comparison drowns out a woman's inner voice, a woman who does not compare hears her own voice more strongly. This voice is reflected in her life, her aesthetics, and her relationships. Such women do not gain beauty, they cultivate it. Because, as you will appreciate, the beauty carried by a free mind is too special for any comparison to align it. 6. They do not fall into the trap of refusing to improve themselves by saying, "This is just who I am." Now, generally speaking, this is how it goes. One of the greatest virtues of truly beautiful women is that they do not confine themselves to a fixed mold, because they know that the phrase, "This is just who I am," is the most elegant trap that sabotages a person's growth. Of course, this phrase becomes a barrier that rejects the need for development, stops learning, and quietly extinguishes a woman's inner potential. Beautiful women do the opposite. They see change not as a threat, but as an invitation. They constantly renew themselves. They accept acquiring new ideas, gaining a new perspective, and adding a new habit, not as a burden but as a kindness to their souls. As they develop, they become more beautiful. As they become more beautiful, their self-confidence deepens. Furthermore, these women know that maturity is not stagnation. It is a constantly expanding awareness. Because of this, they see every situation they encounter as a teacher. When faced with a mistake, they do not close themselves off or go on the defensive. Instead, they transform by asking, "What can I do better here?" This approach becomes a power that expands both their psychological and emotional worlds. The courage to develop who they are appears as elegance when viewed from the outside. Because the most aesthetic aspect of a person is not hiding their flaws, but the intention to overcome them. Beautiful women create lasting appeal because they carry this intention. In addition, most people who say, "This is who I am," unknowingly diminish themselves, because avoiding change becomes a kind of internal trap. These women, however, do not bow to any limits. They value developing their emotional intelligence, communication skills, ways of expressing themselves, body language, and even their gaze. This development enhances not only their beauty, but also their quality of life. Over time, they make stronger decisions, build healthier relationships, and respond more balanced. This inner strength gained through development creates an impact far more impressive than their outward appearance, an invisible authority felt by those around them. Looking at it from another angle, women who never give up on self-improvement also view life through a broader lens. They see understanding people, listening to different ideas, and refreshing their minds with new information not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Even a single sentence in a book can change their world of thought. Even a 3-minute conversation with someone can broaden their horizons. This flexibility makes them both wiser and younger. Because as the mind renews itself, you will appreciate that the face softens. As thoughts are refreshed, the expression carried by the body becomes brighter. Remember, this shows that beauty is nourished not only by possessing things, but also by mental vitality. 7. They do not make the mistake of constantly keeping people in their lives who tire their spirits, and do not motivate them, regardless of whether they are women or men. Before starting this very important point, let me first state that the most striking difference between truly beautiful women is that they put peace at the center of their lives. Because they know that the source of a woman's radiance, the calmness in her gaze, and the strength in her posture is not just aesthetic, it is the energy of the people around her. Continuing to carry people in their lives who strain their spirit, constantly consume them, and lower their motivation gradually extinguishes their inner beauty. Essentially, this is why beautiful women intuitively understand that they must not keep people in their lives, friends, partners, relatives, it doesn't matter, who constantly take from them but give nothing in return. Moreover, this decision sometimes comes quietly, sometimes quickly, sometimes after years, but it always comes because they know better than anyone else the importance of protecting their own mental health. In fact, there is also this reality: for these women, relationships are not a transaction, they are a flow. If a person enters your life, they should nourish you emotionally and mentally, make you grow, refresh you, and open a door to life. Yet some people do the exact opposite. They constantly complain, drain your energy, make you feel guilty, create drama, or ignore your boundaries. When beautiful women realize how such relationships drag them down, they don't wait for the other person to take responsibility for change. They quietly step back. Because a woman's strongest move is often not to shout, it is to choose not to walk alongside them anymore. In particular, being able to make this choice is one of the brightest indicators of their inner self-confidence. I should also add that being surrounded by people who don't drain their spirits gives these women a different look on their faces. People in energy-consuming relationships have a noticeable heaviness on their faces. Their jaws clench, their shoulders slump, their eyes are dull. However, there is also a reality that beautiful women do not succumb to this heaviness because they are very good at distinguishing who is good for them. The people they keep in their lives support their development, increase their light, and expand their energy. In this environment, women are not only happier, they look more beautiful. Because when a woman's soul is at ease, even her skin glows differently. That is why beauty is often not an external treatment. It is the natural result of cleansing the soul. Let me also point out that these women deeply understand that setting boundaries with people is not harshness. It is self-love. Constantly carrying another person's emotional burden is often mistaken for love, but it is actually a behavior that weakens self-worth. Beautiful women do not fall into this misconception. When they set boundaries, they are not cruel. They display a stance that protects themselves and takes control of their lives. If a person's behavior creates a constantly exhausting cycle, they choose to leave that cycle rather than remain in it. This choice empowers them emotionally and allows for the blossoming of higher quality relationships around them. Because when a woman respects herself, her environment automatically reshapes itself. In fact, not keeping people who drain their spirit in their lives is also a choice that keeps their motivation alive. Because every person either elevates or lowers, either inspires or dulls. Beautiful women realize that an environment filled with uninspiring people eventually overshadows their own values. Naturally, this is why they are not afraid of being alone. Rather than staying with the wrong person, they prefer solitude to make room for the right one. This solitude refreshes their spirits, clarifies their thoughts, and allows them to understand what they truly want in life. The energy field of women who achieve this changes, and this change is visible both on their faces and in their lives. 8. They always remember that they carry their beauty not only through aesthetics, but also through self-confidence and posture. I want to start with a bitter truth. One of the most fascinating aspects of truly beautiful women is that they know beauty is not limited to facial features. Therefore, when they look in the mirror, they evaluate not only the visible aesthetic details, but also the posture they carry, the energy they express, and the self-confidence they possess. Because they know that what makes a woman's beauty lasting and impressive is not the symmetry of her face, but the impact she creates with her presence. Naturally, the mark left by a woman who walks with confidence is deeper than makeup or aesthetic enhancements could ever achieve. And this difference is felt from the very first encounter, because confidence carries, magnifies, and becomes the defining framework of aesthetics. Essentially, for these women, posture is the silent but most powerful ally of appearance. Posture is not just about keeping your shoulders straight, it is an inner center that carries the weight of the soul. Their slow speech, calm reactions, determination in eye contact, and respect for themselves create an invisible authority around them. Therefore, they are not swayed by anyone's words or changed by anyone's gaze. They do not see their beauty as a separate part from their posture. On the contrary, they carry their posture as the greatest complement to their appearance. A determined posture makes even the facial features more distinct and meaningful. Because beauty is not an image, it is a form of posture. I would also like to add that beautiful women do not base their self-confidence on the reactions of others. What makes them beautiful is not what society likes, but how they feel about themselves and how they carry themselves. When a woman is confident, even her makeup-free face attracts attention because people look at her essence, not her face. This inner glow that comes from self-confidence is the true source of attractiveness. Even on days when they don't receive compliments, their light doesn't fade, because they draw their strength from within, not from outside. That's why they carry a distinct aura that is noticeable even when passing by, an elegance that is not contrived but comes naturally. Furthermore, these women see beauty not as a competition but as a form of expression. They do not compare themselves to other women. They are not slaves to the standards dictated by fashion, and they do not force themselves to look good in the eyes of others. For them, beauty is measured by how they live their lives, how they treat themselves, and how they make a room feel when they enter it. When a woman's energy is strong, her aesthetics are also strengthened. Therefore, self-confidence is not an adornment for them. It is the cornerstone of their beauty, because charm that does not come from within cannot be completed no matter what you do on the outside. Looking at it from another angle, women who carry their beauty with their posture do not lose their aesthetics in the face of difficulties. Even when life weighs heavily on them, they do not lose their center. Instead of giving up, they deepen, This depth adds wisdom to their faces, grace to their bodies, and maturity to their expressions. Such women do not become ugly as they age. On the contrary, they become more impressive. Because aesthetics change over time, but poise and self-confidence are a type of beauty that grows stronger with a woman's character. That's why their appeal grows not with age, but with spirit. Ultimately, beautiful women know that aesthetics cannot stand alone. Beauty without self-confidence is short-lived, and aesthetics without poise remain in the shadows. That's why they remind themselves every time they look in the mirror, "My beauty is not just in my face, but in my being." They impress not with their faces, but with their walk, not with their makeup, but with their energy, not with their clothes, but with their posture. Such women don't wear beauty. They carry it. That's why their beauty is not only seen, it is felt, remembered, and not easily forgotten. 9. They don't fall into a state of helplessness or play the fatalism card. Friends, I want to say this. The strongest aspect of truly beautiful women is that they shape life with an active stance rather than passively accepting it. Because they know that the feeling of helplessness is often more of a shadow created by the mind than a real situation. They do not romanticize any hardship they experience by saying, "This is my fate." Of course, this kind of fatalism quietly erodes a person's will. It sidelines their power and obscures their direction. Yet beautiful women are masters at seeing the areas they can control. If a door closes, they realize it's just the beginning of a search for a new direction. Instead of accepting helplessness as fate, they use it as a spark to take action. Here's the thing. These women move forward with a consciousness that questions every situation life presents them with. Even if they know they cannot change some difficulties, they are always aware that there is something they can change: their own attitude. The power of the mind is not an abstract concept for them. It is one of the most visible realities of their lives. That's why when they encounter a problem, they seek solutions rather than giving in. Of course, their courage comes into play during this process, because the antidote to helplessness is always a step forward, no matter how small. This step strengthens them spiritually and allows them to carry their beauty with a more determined aura. As many of us know, beautiful women do not take refuge in fatalism, because they know that what is called fate is often just a veil used to cover people's choices, their neglected responsibilities, and the truths they avoid facing. For these women, life is not a passive waiting game. It is an active field of shaping. Even when life gets tough, they move forward without forgetting their roles. They have internalized the truth that nothing changes until I change. Remember, change does not come from outside. It starts from within. This inner transformation is reflected in their faces as a stronger, more determined and deeper expression. I should also add that not surrendering to helplessness allows them to take a more solid stance in relationships. Some people abandon themselves to their partners in difficult times, get swept away by their decisions, or expect them to save them. Beautiful women reject this dependency. They do not allow a relationship to take them away from their own power. Because a woman who takes responsibility for herself becomes both more attractive and more respectable. One of the most captivating things in a man's eyes is a woman who can lean on herself even when conditions get tough. Not using helplessness as a role makes them more balanced and stronger in relationships. Ultimately, these women know that helplessness is not a fate, it is a choice. When a woman believes in her own power, she manages to find her way even in the most difficult periods of life. A woman who is not a prisoner of her fate becomes the author of her own story. This takes her out of the ordinary and endows her with deep wisdom. The beauty of such a woman does not fade with age. On the contrary, her spirit, strengthened with every struggle, adds a new layer to her aesthetic. Therefore, their beauty is not only in their faces, it is carried in their defiant stance towards life, their courageous steps towards change, and their minds that do not surrender to helplessness. 10. They do not make the mistake of engaging in conversations that drain their energy. Essentially, I want to start by saying this. One of the most noticeable characteristics of truly beautiful women is that they understand that conversation is not just about words. Because they know that every conversation either gives energy or takes it away. That's why they consciously avoid engaging in empty, complaint-focused, gossip-based, pessimistic, or self-deprecating conversations. The tone of a conversation instantly changes the mood, and mood is reflected in a woman's face, voice, and posture. Beautiful women understand this chain very well and quietly remove anything that drains their energy from their lives. Because the most invisible, most powerful source of beauty is inner peace. Of course, there is also this situation. When communicating, these women focus not only on what is being said, but also on the feeling that conversation creates within them. If a conversation makes them feel drained, they notice it and do not force themselves to continue. Energy-draining conversations often carry a hidden burden. The other person's drama, endless complaints, victimization, constant negativity. Beautiful women know this harms them, so they don't exhaust themselves under the guise of empathy. Because empathy isn't about destroying yourself to carry others. True empathy is something a person who can set boundaries can do. That's why these women tend to become more powerful internally as they conserve their energy. Also, let's never forget that beautiful women know that gossip-based conversations both damage character and drain energy. Gossip may make a person feel like they belong to a group in the moment, but in the long run, it leaves a heavy feeling inside. These women are intuitive and conscious enough to notice the shadow such heaviness leaves on their faces. Instead of magnifying a person's mistakes in front of others, they prefer to focus on their own lives. This focus makes them appear more mature and creates a more respectable energy around them, because a person's energy is directly connected to what they talk about. In addition, not engaging in energy-consuming conversations does not only mean avoiding them, it also means being selective. Beautiful women prefer conversations that develop them, open their minds, add vision to life, and inspire. Such conversations elevate them, deepen them, and even put a brighter expression on their faces, because the expansion of the mind is reflected in the expression of the face. Naturally, the more a woman engages in quality conversations, the more serene and determined her appearance becomes. These women equate the quality of conversation with the quality of their lives. Therefore, they generally gravitate toward connections that nourish their souls rather than random dialogues. The most explosive aspect of this is that women who stay away from energy-draining conversations have stronger self-confidence. Because the freedom that comes with saying, "I don't have to be part of every conversation," makes a person emotionally independent. These women don't get dragged into unnecessary conversations for fear of hurting the other person. They politely change the subject, end the conversation, or keep their distance. This distance is part of protecting their self-worth. When a woman preserves her own energy, she is not easily shaken by what others say. Thus her stance becomes stronger and her presence more impressive. As a very brief summary of these 10 points, I can tell you, friends, that the common trait among beautiful women is that they never see aesthetics as a starting point, but truly embrace self-confidence as a lifestyle. As a result of all the points I mentioned in this video, the charm of beautiful women never fades over time, because their stance, their courage and wisdom, and their peaceful coexistence with their inner selves will actually deepen as the days and years go by. And ultimately, a strong woman not only looks beautiful, but she also actually beautifies every space she inhabits. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like it and subscribe. Take care of yourself and see you in the next video. Remember, women are the ones with the power to change the world. Bravely forge your own path and enjoy every moment.